What is it like being an Uber driver and a Lyft driver in Miami? Welcome back to Buck Living, a channel all about making money where I'm documenting our journey to get $1 million on YouTube. Now, in this video, talking about ride sharing, being an Uber driver and a Lyft driver, I've interviewed a bunch of drivers here in Miami, both online in terms of reading comments of drivers in Miami, but also offline. Every single time I've gone out, staying here in Miami, I've interviewed drivers talking about the hourly rates, the people, the climate, the culture, and a lot more. So let's jump right into this. One, I hate YouTubers that ramble on in terms of 10 minutes of yapping with no real context. This is the big thing you probably want to know. About 20 to 22 an hour. Let's start there. When it comes to how much do drivers make, in case you didn't know, your location is the number one factor that determines how much money you can make. Some cities, just given the natural climate, given the layout of the city, the way that people interact, like for example, in Vegas, the culture is very different than in LA versus Miami, et cetera, et cetera. And when it comes to the countrywide average, I'm gonna say 20 to 25 an hour. I just the average amount I'd say that most rideshare drivers make. So here in Miami, you're looking at about the average. That's what I've realized when talking to a lot of drivers. But it is interesting because I also notice a big spread when it comes to the income when it comes to drivers. And I think there's one unique thing about Miami that I think stands out compared to almost every other city. And I mean this in a very positive way. And that is the way the nightlife works. Because when it comes to Miami, and this is something that's been blowing my mind since I've been here, this is my first time really exploring Miami. I was here one time like 10 or 11 years ago for a day or two. So I didn't really explore Miami. But I've been here doing like Miami Music Week. I did the Ultra Music Festival. I've gone out to different areas like Wynwood. I've gone to Club Space. I've done the Miami stuff. And in most places in America, it's a hard cutoff at 2 a.m. when it comes to the nightlife. And as we all know, the biggest commuting hours when it comes to making the most amount of money, when it comes to being a driver, is the commuting hours in terms of the morning, 7 to 9 a.m., evening, 5 to 7 p.m., and then, if I even use that word, commuting to the bar, the nightlife, Friday and Saturday nights. So morning and evening commutes, Friday and Saturday nights are the biggest times to make the most amount of money. When it comes to most cities, when you're talking about Friday and Saturday nights, which are usually the peak times to drive, usually Friday and Saturday nights are like the top level time where you can drive and make the most amount of money. In Miami, things are not a hard cutoff at 2 a.m., which is very interesting. In most cities, it is. In almost every other city in America, Vegas is an exception with some stuff happening after hours. New York, I will say, is also an exception. But I feel like if anything, maybe even more than both those cities, I think things in Miami are so much always happening all the time. Like most of the bars here close at 5 a.m., for example. There are some areas like Wynwood, the bars close around 3-ish a.m. Other areas could be 5 a.m. Then you look at Club Space, which is literally 24/7. So the thing about Miami, which kind of gives me a lot of other vibes of, like I said, some elements of Vegas and New York, but maybe even more so, depending on how you look at it, is that nightlife here is so prominent with the longevity of nightlife that your opportunity to make a good amount of money, in my opinion, is a lot higher. So although I will say 20 to 22 an hour is the average, and that's what I've realized when it comes to most drivers when I talk to them. I've even looked this up. It's about 22 an hour based off some analytics online. So I even Googled it saying, okay, based off like not just interviewing drivers in person about their own personal experience, but also what about all the online analytics, about 22-ish an hour. That being said, I've talked to some drivers who say, yeah, you know what though, it really depends. Like if I do an 8-hour shift, and let's say start at, 8 p.m. and get done at 4 a.m. because you can literally drive that long, you might still be able to make a good amount of money because in most cities, around 2, 3, 4 a.m., that's when people are leaving the bars. So yes, things might be surging a little bit, but things start to die off. Here in Miami, though, when talking to some drivers, they're like, yeah, but here's the thing. In Miami, though, it's the opposite. Like things are going so late that if you want to drive very, very, very late into the morning, if you want to drive till 5 or 6 a.m., you can easily do that. And I have talked about this in different videos with other cities, for example, and this is true, I think, across the country, so not just in Miami or whatever, is a big time I know a lot of drivers like to do is 4 a.m. to about 10 a.m. I personally hate that. Now, this is during the week. I want to mention that. I personally would not like to do that, but I know some drivers say, hey, I wake up at 3:30 a.m., start driving at 4. I do usually airport rides from 4 a.m. to about 7. Then I do the morning commuting hours, so 7 a.m. to about 9 or 10 a.m., do a 6-hour shift. Now I'm done for the day. So it's 10 a.m. If I want to go to the beach, if I just want to relax, if I want to go on a hike, if I want to walk outside, I have the entire day to myself to do whatever I did because I got my work out of the way, so to speak. And here in Miami, it seemed like you could potentially do that if you're, like, say, more of a night owl, you're someone, like, say, really likes the nightlife scene, like, say you do prefer driving around drunk people. And for me, being honest, I prefer driving around drunk people on Friday and Saturday nights more than the morning and evening commutes. Because for me personally, when I was driving in Boston, when I first started driving, the morning commuting hours, sometimes it could pay a lot. They could pay a lot in Boston, especially, like, say, if it was snowing, if the T broke down, which is public transportation. In those instances, I mean, you can make a lot of money, but the thing is, no one's excited to go to work. And I found for me it was more depressing. Like, the rides were pretty much just kind of like sitting there. You could tell someone's in the car. Maybe they have a meeting going on. Maybe they have something going on, and they're just, like, not excited. I had people complain to me about their job. On Friday and Saturday nights, yeah, it can be a little, not just a little bit. It can be very rowdy. You have to deal with people potentially trying to drink in your car, people potentially getting sick and puking. So there are more complications. But to me, it just felt more fun. And if you're, like, say, in that category of people that likes and prefers driving around drunk people because of the energy, it's a bit more upbeat, a bit more positive as well, I think Miami's a good spot for that. And that's what I've noticed with a lot of drivers, because the nightlife scene here is very, very prevalent in Miami, of course. But also, I think it's the longevity of it. It's the longevity of that when you're going out and everything, you could be picking somebody up at literally 4 a.m. and the bars are still popping off. The bars are still packed at 4 a.m. Any other city, it's dead. At 4 a.m., pretty much all you're going to get is airport rides. And I think that's one thing I will say about Miami that I've noticed when interviewing the drivers is things here I feel more, and this is the best way I'm going to word it, and this is very important for this video. It seems like a bit random, but it's very important for this video. I feel like the nightlife scene here gives me more European vibes than typical American vibes. Because most people in America, and I'm making something up in terms of, like, it's tough to say specifics, but you start getting ready at 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. You go out around 10 or 11. You stay out till 1:30 because 1:30 is last call, typically for most bars. You get home at 2:30. That's most nights in America. Yes, you could do afters and stuff like that, but, like, for most people in America when it comes to the bar scene and the nightlife scene. Here in Miami, though, it's very similar to Europe, where you start getting ready at 11 p.m., you go out at midnight or 1, and you're out till 4 or 5 a.m., maybe even later, right? If you want to, let's say, then hit space at 5 a.m. and party till 9 a.m. Like, you can do that. And I think that's a big thing about Miami, that although, yeah, the average seems to be about 22 an hour, give or take, I think that, well, that's the average. When I look at how much can you make during the nightlife time, I think your opportunity to make more is significantly higher here in Miami compared to most other areas. Maybe even more than Vegas, and maybe even more than New York, because if, let's say, people want to go out after work and do what I'm going to call the happy hour hours. So let's say 5 p.m. to about 8 or 9 p.m., you can do that. Then, let's say if you want to do what I'm going to call typical American hours, you go out around 9 or 10, you get home around 1 or 2. You have people doing that, and that's surging. And then you have people who are doing what I'm going to call the European hours, midnight or 1 to about 5 or 6. You can have surging there. Bonuses, incentives, making more money. And then you want to do, like, the tail end hours, like Club Space and other venues and stuff like that, that may be more like the afters, the after parties. Those go from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. So I think the opportunity in Miami, although from what it seems like, I think during off-peak hours, doesn't seem as worth it. I'll be honest. It seems like that if you're doing, like, say, Tuesday at 1 p.m., in some cities like LA, that can actually still be a good time to drive, Tuesday at 1 p.m. Not optimal, but still not bad. Here in Miami, seems to be not the best case. It almost seems like feast or famine, where when things are popping off in terms of the morning and evening commutes, which are very typical, but especially the nightlife scene on Friday and Saturday nights, and I mean, I'm going to include Saturday and Sunday mornings, because, you know, once it hits a.m. or 12 a.m. or 1 a.m., and you're talking about technically the early morning, right? I guess depending on who you look at it, tomato. When it comes to the nightlife scene here in Miami, because it's so long in terms of the hours and the spread of people going out, you're talking about high surges, a lot of people going out, and a lot of people having to get Ubers and having to get Lyfts. And I've noticed for me personally, when ordering them as well, you know, in terms of me just paying for them, the prices can be pretty high, even for me just going a few miles down the road. And we all know this when it comes to surge pricing. And a lot of that does really come into play when you talk about the nightlife scene of a lot of stuff happening, a lot of people going out. That's what causes these surge pockets. So overall, it seems like when it comes to Miami, if you want to be a driver during what seems like the commuting hours and the off-peak hours, the money's about average. Like I said, about 20 to 22 an hour, so maybe a slight bit under average, but about average for the average driver. However, if you do prefer driving in terms of the nightlife scene, like I said, if you do prefer driving when it comes to drunk people, hate to say it, let's be honest, and people going out and partying and everything, the opportunity I feel like is pretty high to make a lot of money at almost any time that you're driving, whether it's from 5 p.m. to then 5 a.m., you have a huge spread of hours that you can drive where it's surging to make a good amount of money.